What's Left of the South.
Thank you all for tuning in to What's Left of the South. I lost my notes. Hold on. Okay, turning into... I've done this enough. You think I have it memorized. A podcast about Southern working class history and current events from a leftist perspective. This podcast is brought to you by being in a new tax bracket, testosterone levels, anxiety, living at home, aging parents, Ian Fidance, Kai's war against the British Empire, Nelson finally getting a real job and moving out of his mother's house, Tyler's hiatus, which will inevitably lower our listener count, Sweet Mark's homework assignments, and the Ghost Adventures crew. As always, I'm Nelson with...
And I'm the girl that got her whole family turned into bluebirds.
The deer wearing clothes at the animal school.
And our guest this evening is back for a second time because he's awesome. You know him from TikTok.
He's currently losing it.
We've killed our guest. No,
Oh,
no. We were
Can't
just
get any
talking about
spookier than that.
It's a ghost. Woo.
Like, okay.
We're just talking about how hard it is for minorities to break into this horror and paranormal stuff, and we killed him. Oh my god. And our guest this evening is the one, the only, you know from TikTok, the awesome
normal Joshua Darren.
Yeah, Josh is back.
Yeah, it's spooky month on Watts Pod.
It's spooky, spooky, spooky. Mark is here, and it's really spooky.
No, okay, Nelson, you weren't in the group chat when Mark and I were talking. I said that for this month we should introduce ourselves as our favorite characters from Over the Garden Wall.
Oh, okay. I like the pumpkin people. The pumpkin people are pretty badass.
Then you're Enoch.
Enoch. Ooh, why did you come here? Why did you disturb my pumpkin patch? And also the president. I love when the brother holds up the phone.
President,
Like,
get down.
the president is naked. Ah! Potatoes and Molasses is my favorite song of all time. I love that song. It's so good.
They're good words.
God, I just love Over the Garden Wall is the shit. I'm gonna watch it again. I've watched it like 3 times through already, even if I'm gonna watch it again. Anyway,
Nice.
so we were talking about our favorite TV show of all time. The greatest paranormal show of all time, led by 3 awesome dudes that are probably really cool to know and are probably a hit at parties, that are the trendiest, most
There's
awesomest people. There's 4 now. We're talking about the Ghost Adventures crew because we're talking about ghosts. Josh, do you tell us that the episode you were talking about that really reeled you in, that one that was like solidified you as a diehard Ghost Adventures fan, just like the rest of us?
You're just shooting all his credibility in the foot. Come on now. We were talking about it because they're so ridiculous, okay? I'm not letting anybody think about Josh this way, all right?
Sarcasm is dead on this fucking podcast.
Oh man, yeah, it was. So I will say, admittedly, I watched it a lot when I was growing up, like a lot.
It's
and
great.
Yeah, Zach Baggins, like, man, much respect to that guy. And then I started like growing up and kind of like getting into the world.
I put down the Axe body spray. I
Stop
realize that
spiking my hair.
affliction t-shirts are dumb.
And you know, he found a great way to, I think he found a great way to commercialize like ghost hunting and make it seem like you're always going to get some action every time. Like if somebody says like, I think I'm haunted, like you're leaving the episode being like, wow, like it must suck to be them in their house, or it must suck to be investigating this place because so many demons. But I stopped watching because I was like, I can't take it anymore. Like Zach is always like mad and angry and putting his mask on and getting pissed and feeling all, you know, every single time. And then like, you know, Aaron be like yelling, and scared and running around. And they finally reeled me in for that the museum episode. And I was like, well, I kind of want to see Zach's Haunted Museum. Like, who doesn't want to see that? And it was, I was doing good. I was like kind of in it, kind of not, kind of on my phone. And then I got to the Dybbuk box section where they spent like probably 75% of the episode with Aaron being like, I think I'm going to touch it. Like, I think I'm going to do, like, I just feel this thing where I'm
Bro,
like,
don't do it, bro.
I'm going to, and then Zach's like, no, dude, no. Do you understand what a Dybbuk box is? And he was like, I just feel compelled. I'm going to do it. And then they started bigger. No, I'm going to do it. And then he just sits there and he's like about to touch it. And he's like, no, I can't do it. I just got this really bad feeling. And it's like, so you spent 75 minutes of this show yelling at a box that I to this day do not believe is actually haunted, because Dybbuk boxes are in their own whole category of things that, you know, when it comes to touchy, I don't, you know. But either way, the mysticism of I'm not going to go, whole other thing. Nonetheless, I watched it and I was pissed because it was like 2 hours and I got nothing from it. So yeah, that's my favorite Ghost Adventures episode, because it was horrible.
The only time they've ever, I think, caught something was like their first indie episode that got them the show, and those boards levitated and that brick flew across the room. That was the only time they have ever, I think, actually caught something on camera that was like, oh, that's actually pretty creepy. But other than that, all the stuff, I don't think they've ever caught anything else. It's just always been shaky camera angles and shadows and Zach going, oh, it's a demon. Oh, the demon's got me.
I'm so mad.
Oh, I got 3 marks on me. It's the devil, bro. It's the devil. It's like, dude,
they're mocking the Trinity with the 3 marks.
Yeah. It's like, dude, you're mocking the Trinity with all those stupid crosses on your shirt. Like, calm down.
I have been very slightly obsessed with Zach Bagans because he mystifies me that this person could be so popular because he's so goofy. Like, everything about him is so goofy. So like when his books came out, I bought his books because I'm like, what is it? There's got to be something inside here. There's got to be something going on. No, he really is this goofy. And he had the same ghostwriter on both of his like normally published books. There's like a Ghost Hunting for Dummies that he probably wrote like 4 sentences of, and then there's 2 books that are supposed to be his books that has a ghostwriter. I don't think she's even like a ghostwriter because her name is on the cover.
Is she a ghost?
Her name is Kelly Krieger, and I don't think she's a ghost.
Mark coming in clutch with the sound effects there is beautiful. Oh, did you hear the ghost, guys? Oh my God, it was a ghost.
But his books are just like, the reason that I know that he at least had something to do with these books is because if you think about his voice when you're reading it, it sounds just like him. So I can only assume that Kelly was there, like he just like spoke into like a recorder and she just typed it out, like that's it. But if you ever look at his books, like it has pictures of his tattoos. His tattoos are god awful. They are so bad. It's so bad.
Why?
It's like when he talks about how he couldn't date because there was a female ghost that he investigated, that she was on the 11th floor of this hotel, so he got a tattoo of an 11 on his arm, but she followed him home and she would attack all of his girlfriends. Like one of the things that I remember specifically is that
it's definitely a ghost.
I looked into his background. Like, he puts it in his books, and he's from Florida. So, I mean, I'm done for yet again. He's from Clearwater, Florida, or near Tampa. It's out that way. And he's the thing that he said about that. The thing he said about that is that, like, Florida it's really common for thunderstorms to roll in the summer every day at around the same time in the afternoon, and that he would decide to go surfing when the storms are rolling in when all the other surfers were getting out of the water.
This isn't scary water. To me, it's just regular water.
You're so edgy that you're like risking drowning, like getting hit by lightning, by like any of these things that can happen with these thunderstorms that come in. He used to be a wedding DJ for a little while, right?
I need to know. What his set is.
He just stumbled into fame. He's just like, let me get like two other like losers, and we'll just go like hunt ghosts. And they just happened to catch something that looked spooky, and then they just fucking ran with it. I was like, oh, I hate when like mediocre people just stumble into fucking fame like that. It's just like, my God. Like,
I look at how hard we have to try to get like 1,000 listeners an episode, and he just like stumbles into a media empire.
Yeah. Oh my God. All right, that's it. We're gonna go ghost hunting now. We gotta like get some shit fucking on some string. Mark's gonna have to die. Like we're gonna do this.
You gotta get footage of like my legs like running from me like holding the camera, and I'm like not holding it still. And then I drop it, and then something like goes by the camera really quickly, and I scream.
Mark gets possessed and levitates, but an A24 film makes no fucking sense.
We could do this.
Oh my God!
I don't think Zoomers know about Blair Witch projects. We could just redo the Blair Witch Project.
Yeah, they don't. There's no way.
There's no way.
But like the oldest of them were 2 when that movie came out. So
when that come out, like 1999.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Oh my
God. I remember
Holy
watching Blair Witch 2
shit.
when it was on pay-per-view. Because I didn't know anything. Because again, this was, what would that be, like 2001, 2002 that came out? So like, you don't know. You didn't have the information to know that it was going to be that bad. And at that point, I would have been 13 or 14.
And we thought that movie was that was the first found footage.
Scary.
Like we really thought that was scary. Like, I'm so scared. Like this stuff right up there.
Do you guys remember when the media treated it like it was real?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And people were like, is it real? Is it not? Like now here we are, 25 years on going like, of course it's not real. But
Yeah.
Look at it. Look at it. And I actually had a conversation about this today about like that 1997 to like 2004, 2005, just those movies in that time period. My God. I don't know what America was going through, but we were going through something. Because those movies, so many of those movies are not good. But we thought they were so good. Like, here's a great example. I don't even know if this is in the time frame. I just don't like this movie. But Spawn. Ugh.
wait, the superhero one?
Oh yeah, I hate it.
What?
I remember watching that with somebody. So I was a teenager, and somebody had a laptop, and we were in a hotel room. There was like 5 of us in a hotel room. We were trying to watch it on this laptop, but the CD drive or the disc itself were corrupted. So it was just like really hard to watch. You watched it in like 5-minute chunks, and then it would skip, and then the audio wouldn't.
I'm about to take the podcast. Oh God!
Look.
Kicked off.
The CGI is super corny, right?
Oh, it's horrible.
But it's just it's not bad. Okay, the CGI is extremely corny and bad. I get it, but like the story it's funny, it's horror. Like I like it, and I'm ready for the remake where it's Christopher Dorner comes back. It is Spawn.
Oh, no, I'm thinking the ones that I remember, like you have so the things that you have to have are like somebody's wearing leather, and there has to be a blue or green filter over all the footage. Like it's got to be like very cool toned. There's a lot of blacks, a lot of grays, greens, blues.
The Mexico filter, the one they use for any
time.
The
yellow
Mexico.
tan.
It was just like a string of after Blair Witch, everyone wanted to do found footage. It just seemed like there was so much like found footage. It's like, all right, Joe, after a while, we get it. Like it's not real. It's just made to look, calm the fuck down.
I will say, Paranormal Activity got me.
Yeah, that was good.
It got me. It got me for a good month. Only because like my sleep is so precious to me. And the worst place you could possibly do any of these things to me is while I'm sleeping. Don't tickle my feet. Don't touch my toes. Don't pull my blankets. I'm a bad person when you bother me. So like I was emotionally affected because like, can you imagine? Like I don't go to sleep in haunted hotel rooms for that very reason. I don't like being bothered when I'm asleep. Bother me during the day. Like
you must be on the schedule, okay?
I can interact with you. You know, we can play some games. We can have fun. Do not bother me when I'm sleeping, because for one, I'm going to tear a hole through the wall, or I'm going to summon Satan because I'm going to be such a bad person. So, like,
Okay, let's go around. We already have Josh's answer. Would Mark or Nelson sleep in a haunted hotel? Like sleep, not go there to investigate. Like at night, I mean sleep in a haunted hotel.
Do I get a nightlight or no?
You would do it with a nightlight?
I don't know. It changes the answer a little bit, I feel. Or is like does the
Nerd.
is it like
Shut up, Nelson.
okay? Well, we know Mr. White Audacity over there is gonna be like, oh, I'm not scared.
I ain't never scared, brother.
I'll do it. I'll punch a ghost.
Hell yeah, brother. I'm punching that ghost for America. I'm going to shoot that ghost in my AR-15 with these special magic bullets.
I will say, though, I don't volunteer myself, but I did end up sleeping in a very haunted hotel room.
Was it by accident?
Well, it wasn't by choice, I can tell you that. And I did it for 4 nights. So I did the Strange Escapes thing with Amy Bruni and like those guys. And I stayed at Belvoir, and I stayed in funny full circle moment, in a room that I think one of the few times like Ghost Adventures actually got some like real like evidence. So they put the music box in this one specific room and they let it play. And then a little girl in the room that nobody saw started like singing the song. And this is a building that used to be an orphanage, and they have like little children ghosts like frequently seen. And so I get there and I'm like, it's the nighttime. I'm happy to be there. I'm like, yeah, this inn isn't haunted, whatever. Like, it's cool. I haven't felt anything, no vibes. And then the owner actually comes and he's like, yeah, and I feel bad for Josh because he has like the most haunted room here. And I was like, who, me? And he was like, yeah, that's you. He was like, then he told me the Ghost Adventure stories. And then he was like, yeah, and like people are like frequently seeing things in that room. So yeah, well, happy sleeping. And it was like 11 o'clock at night too. So it's not something I can be like, okay, let me walk around the property, like get it out of my head. I'm good. No, like I'm going straight to bed. Like, and I had a couple, you know,
to really sleep.
So I was so not only that, my fear was heightened at that point. So I was like, what am I gonna do? I'm like, you know, I'm a little tipsy, like it's no big deal, like, you know, the whiskey hit for sure. But I'm about to go to bed, and I'm like, the buzz is going down. Like, I'm starting to become fully aware of what you just said.
You just hear Morgan Wallen, last night you made the liquor talk.
And I was like, and all the rooms were taken too. So like there was no switching. So yeah, when I got up there, I was like, I literally walked in the room and said, hey, look, I'm cool. You're cool. I won't bother you. You won't bother me. In the daytime, have your way. Throw my stuff around, move my bags around, show up, hang out with me in the shower. I don't care. You know, I'm taking a pee. That's your time to tap on the door. But while I'm sleeping, do not bother me, please. I won't bother you. And then I did like a mental like beam. I was like, hey, in case y'all thought I was playing, mental beam everywhere. And then and then I put on ESPN, and there was a ton of baseball happening at this time. And I slept like a baby for 4 nights straight. So what I've learned is that ghosts do not like ESPN. So
by the power of baseball, I will make it through the night.
Like, fuck that. I don't want to watch ESPN. I like watching our regular cable. I want NBC Sports.
If I see another top 10, I'm gonna actually go back to the other side. That's what I assumed happened, because I didn't have a single experience, not one. at all at any point in time. So that was great for me because, like I said, my sleep is very precious. But I did not volunteer for this room, and I will never do so because I don't like it.
All right, Nelson, you didn't answer though. Would you sleep in a haunted room?
Yeah, 100%. All those things like, would you stay here at night for $1 million? Yeah, hell yeah, I'm gonna stay.
Nobody's offering you any money. I'm saying you volunteer to sleep in a haunted room.
Okay, so I'm just gonna be a typical white person and sit and sleep in a haunted. Yeah, okay,
yes.
Yeah, I'll do it. Yeah, I mean, I've already told my story, my experience of a haunted room and getting messed with ghosts. So yeah, I don't care. What are they gonna do to me? All right, ooh, boo. Okay, whatever, cool. I'm more afraid of other people than I am of spirits and ghosts and whatever. You know, it's whatever. I had that I told an other episode, but in college, my friend Forrest and I went to go visit our friend, I think his name was Josh. Yeah, we went to go visit our friend Josh, and he stayed in a apartment complex in Tuscaloosa, and I'm much like our Josh, very finicky with my sleep. I don't like couch surfing. I don't like all that. I just I need a bed. I've always needed a bed. I can't fall asleep in cars. I don't like sleeping on people's couches. Like, I need a bed, preferably my bed, and leave me the fuck alone. But we were crashing at Josh's apartment, and Josh had this like full like queen size but nice room, everything. And I was like, shit, I'm about to sleep on this fucking couch, and Forrest's gonna sleep on the floor, in the chair, or whatever. But Josh like, no, I sleep on the couch. I'm like, can I sleep in the bed then? He was like, man, I don't know. Well, and then he told us, he was like, you know, for a while he had been seeing a ghost of a child would scurry across like his kitchen, and like he would see it and it would just not there, and it was like he would get messed with in his room, and he was just like, all right, you can have the room, I'll have my living room, let me sleep on the couch, blah 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 blah. And I'm just like, I don't give a shit, I'm fucking tired, I'm fat, I want to sleep in this damn bed. I'm not sleeping in this fucking couch, like I'm sleeping in the bed. So that's when things took a hard left turn, because I remember I hate like sleeping with doors open. I need to have doors closed. So what got me first, and what I should have known this was going to be a long fucking night, was his bathroom door was open, right? And he had a long bathroom. Like, it was just like, it was very deep, and like it was black, it was pitch black. And I was like, I hate fucking sleeping with the door open. And right before I'm about to shut this door, Josh goes, hey man, you probably shouldn't shut that door. And I can't even get the words, how come, out of my mouth. I hand to God, right? I swear the future grave of my mother, right? I hear a child's laughter coming from the bathroom. The chill ran down my spine, and I stared in there like, oh, fuck. And I'm just like, I'm skeptic at this point. Like, I just like, whatever. But like, I swear to you, I heard this kid's laughter coming from the bathroom. At this point, I'm like, I felt the chill down my spine, the hair stayed up. I'm like, oh shit. Then I'm just like, I play it off like, oh, Josh got us all riled up because this ghost kid, blah, 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 blah. And I'm still tired fucking. So I leave. I guess I left the door open. I'm not sure. I forgot if I closed it or not. It's kind of a blur. But he did say, you're gonna wait. He's like, I wake up between 4 and 4:30 every night. I can't go to sleep, blah, blah, blah. I hear noises, I feel things, blah, blah, etc. The kid just messes with me. And so I had to say that you get the bedroom in that area and I'll get on the couch. And I'm just like, yeah, okay, cool, whatever. So I go to bed and I'm asleep, and I wake up and I'm like, I swear to God, if I look over and that clock says any time between 4 and 4:30, I'm gonna be fucking pissed. And I rolled over and it was like 4:15, 4:16. I'm like, God damn it. And so I'm laying there, I'm on my stomach because I can't sleep on my back. I'm just like, I'm laying there on my stomach. I'm tucked in. I'm just like, I swear to God, I have to get back to sleep. So I close my eyes. I'm like, I'm gonna go to sleep. I go back to sleep. And then all of a sudden, I feel a pressure on the bed, and I feel something push on the bed and glide up and pressure, and it goes over my back. I feel it. It's like someone had their hand on my, and what I really wish I would have done in hindsight is just see what had happened. Because for all I know, it could have been Forrest and Josh messing with me. But then again, I did hear that kid's laughter, and they're not throwing their voices, right? So I feel the hand, and Josh was legitimately like, he believed this when he would talk. It's like he's not he like legitimately believed this. I'm just like, all right, like how Zach in the Ghost Adventures crew is like, there's ghost, blah 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 blah. I'm just like, all right, man, chill the fuck out. So I feel this little hand, right, like Mark's perfect meatball size making hand, glide across and over my back slowly, and it goes over, and I'm like laying there like, you gotta be fucking kidding me, and I'm like frozen because I'm like, do I look? Is it Forrest and Josh? If I turn around and there's a fucking dead kid at the foot of my bed, I am going to I'm going to shit myself. I'm going to shit myself in this guy's bed. Like, this is going to be horrible. Like, he's going to have to burn this mattress. So, like, I just freeze, right? And I didn't feel anything else. I didn't hear anything else, but I just laid there, and I think I eventually fell back to sleep, and I woke up at like 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning. And I remember the first thing I did was confront Forrest and Josh, like, y'all, were you fucking with me last night? And they're like, they deadpan, like, no, not. We slept the entire time we were in here. Like, they swear they didn't mess with me. And back on my mind, I'm like, no, they're fucking with me. This is not real, whatever. So we leave. And then a few months later, Josh can't take that apartment anymore and leaves. He just like fucking leaves. And I don't know, like, if he looked it up or we looked it, I can't remember, but apparently in that apartment complex, a child did die. So there's some validity to this. I'm still kind of like, this is my mind playing tricks on me, right? Or is this actually like some ghost thing? It's not the only time I've experienced something weird like this. Some shit happened to me in Hawaii. And then like we talked about ghost dog that I saw on the way to Talladega National Forest. But like that was probably the most in-depth, like, if I was going to say something fuck with me, like that was that time. And I'm just like, you gotta be kidding me. The other times it was like just random stuff happening. There was one time when I was in Hawaii, the smoke alarm at the house went off, and I was like, right when I just like shut up, it cut off. I was just like, all right, that's weird. And another time, like the door handle would jiggle on the bedroom door. And it was like shit like that. But like the main time when like something's ever just like, oh fuck, was in that apartment. And I'm just like, I haven't had anything weird except for like seeing that definitely was a fucking ghost dog. Since then it's been like, oh shit. But like that whole, if that was an actual kid ghost, that really did fuck with me. I'm not gonna lie. I was like, kudos to you, kid ghost. You really did scare me. So hats off to you, kid ghost.
Kind of a jerk too.
Yeah, I was like, let me fucking sleep, asshole.
Dennis the Menace, but a ghost.
Yeah.
And it's the giggle. Like, the child ghost is like a jerk because like didn't even bother showing himself. It was just like you're like,
yeah. That's exactly what it sounded like too. I'm like, fuck.
What am I supposed to do with this?
Yeah.
And I'm like,
this is what Mark's gonna be like if he was a ghost.
I'm like you too. I don't like sleeping with doors open. I don't like sleeping around mirrors.
I hate
sleeping with doors open.
I don't like mirrors. I don't like doors open. I was like, I need doors closed and no mirrors. I've never liked mirrors.
Curtains closed.
Yeah, curtains closed too. Yeah,
curtains definitely closed. Yeah.
Fuck
like
that shit.
Like all the way.
Yeah.
Ugh.
All right, Mark.
I must be crazy because all of those things are kind of fine with me, but I also don't sleep. Like my sleep is really bad.
Yeah,
so like it doesn't matter.
You don't sleep.
It doesn't matter. Like if the curtains are open, if there's a mirror in front of my face, like it doesn't matter because I'm not going to sleep anyway. I have a question. I have a question for Josh. So you've been to places where you've experienced something, but you did bring up the vibe. Now, I have been to a lot of places that are supposed to be haunted and experienced nothing. And I always heard like, oh, you get the vibe, you can feel something. So I don't know if I've just gone to places and there wasn't anything there, so there's not a vibe, or if like I just can't do it. But have you experienced the vibe that people talk about?
Yeah, and it's more so from personal experiences. Like, there's just sometimes where, like, I'll put it this way. I always know I'm going to have sleep paralysis. Always. Every single time. And I don't know what that means, Like, it doesn't matter if I lay on my back or not. Like, I purposely don't sleep on my back for that reason. But like, I will lay in the bed and just know I'll be like, okay, this is a night where I'm going to be dreaming, and then I'll wake up and I'll be in full sleep paralysis. But usually it's like just like a vibe. There are places that, like, I don't know, they just kind of give you the
heebie-jeebies,
the ooglies, yeah. So I do think that there's some validity to the vibe, but I also think it's from the same standpoint of just like, and this is a theory I've been kind of working with lately, because Belvoir really just kind of opened my eyes to this. I think sometimes we investigate what the former investigators left. The same way that you can walk into a store and you can look at a clerk and be like, wow, like, yikes, everybody's having a bad day in here today. I see. And you just know it is palpable, that energy's there, like that energy's being created, it's being stirred up, it's being, constantly manifested because everybody's having a bad day. So you walk into like the Winn-Dixie and it's like, dang, like, this is not going to be a fun time. I'm not going to have a good time checking out. Like, I really don't want to be here. Or, you walk into like, I don't know, like a small mom and pop store and you're like, everybody's happy, and I feel it. And I'm kind of happy too. And I feel like that is kind of consistent with places that we go to. So, like, sometimes the vibe, I think that scary thing is people, going in with like not necessarily the best intentions when they're investigating, and kind of leaving that energy there to just ruminate, because there's no dispersion of it. It just stays there. If you go to like a haunted warehouse or something, you're just like, oh, there's demons in here, demons. I'm gonna yell and I'm gonna antagonize, I'm gonna do all these like negative things, and you kind of leave those negative emotions there. And or if you go and you're like, yeah, we're gonna have a good time, I'm laughing, I'm jovial, I feel like sometimes we are the paranormal that we experience. If that sounds like I sound like a nut
like the
right now,
confirmation bias that you're gonna have a bad time, so you're gonna like have the
I was just about to ask,
yeah,
like, how much of this do we think is legitimate? How much of it do you think it's like the mythology we built around things? Like, for instance, in Birmingham, you have Sloss Furnace, right? And everyone's like, it's haunted. There's the evil foreman, they threw him in the furnace and blah, 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 and all this other shit. Or like you go to Huntington College in Montgomery, oh, the red lady, the red, it's something. Or if you go to this, Josh, we were talking about that trail in Tuskegee National Forest. It's like, you're gonna, it's a blah, blah. Like, how much of it, like, I would really like to, like, if I guess like an actual quote unquote experiment could be like, you take people to a place they've never heard of, and you either, one, you tell them that it's haunted and it's just a random place, it's not haunted, and see how they react. Or like, then you take a group of people to a place that you tell them it's just a random place and it actually is reportedly haunted, and see how they react. I think a lot of the times we build up these places, and it's I don't want to say like our minds are playing tricks on us, but if you go into a place and you're like, this is haunted, there's demons, or there's, some people, whatever, this happened here, you're going to go into it thinking you're going to see something. Your mind is going to automatically assume that like every single bump in the night, or every single creak, or every single shadow is a ghost, when it's really just a shadow from like a mouse, or it's just an old building creaks, or it's just a leaky pipe. And it's not until like you actually start like seeing shit levitate and thrown across the room that you're like, okay, maybe there's some validity to this. But it's just how much of it is just in our minds and how much of it is legitimate, I think is the balance that people who investigate paranormal stuff have to that fine line you have to walk. Like, you could be like Ghost Adventures crew and be like, this place is demons, and they fucking screaming at every little noise. Or you could go in thinking, okay, this is just a random place. It could be, or could not be. And you actually see like what happens, right? I think a lot of times, especially I get the TV shows like Taps and Ghost Adventures and Paranormal State and all this. They had to do something for, they had a TV show. They had to make people want to watch. So they're like, oh, the editing and the noises and everything. But if you like go out on your own and look at these places, it's just like the really question you probably need to ask yourself is, how much of this have I just built up in my head, or how much of this is actually legitimate?
Yeah, and I think that that's a strong point, going into places and not feeling anything, because I will say, like, talking with Amy and people like that, and Tinny, they'll always say, there's times where they'll go into a place that's been like hyped up, and haunted, 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 haunted. You won't leave without having an experience. And they go and they investigate and they leave with nothing. Maybe like an EVP or like a random REM pod thing, but for the most part, like they don't really have anything left. So I think that's common. I think that's actually more common than what people expect when they go to places that are haunted, because the supernatural like does what it wants to do when it wants to do it. And you know, sometimes you might not feel the vibe because, you know, the spirits might just might not be there.
The vibes are off, bro. The vibes are off. Spirits like not vibing this, bro. This is bad spirits.
Yeah.
Zach Bagans here. He's a dickhead.
He's gonna call me a demon, and I'm just a human, and I don't feel like having a bad day. So I'm just gonna I'm gonna peace out right now before I get yelled at. I just wanted to have a conversation, and now he's yelling at me.
He's yelling. Now he's speaking to me in some language I don't understand. Like, bro, calm down.
Like, is that Hebrew? Is that Hebrew? I learned one language when I was live, and that was English. So I don't know what he's saying.
Why is he speaking to me in Latin? I don't understand this.
Hey, Chad, you heard that? Can you translate?
Chad, who speaks Latin.
Yeah, exactly. Some random Roman soldier shows up. I know.
Chadimus Decimus.
Yeah,
Chadimus Decimus of the 9th Legion. Santus. Chanting.
I will say though, on a serious note, like to your point, Nelson, there was an experiment done around essentially thought forms and like creating similar experiences to the paranormal, and they ended up shutting down the experiment. I want to say it was in the 70s or the 80s. John Tinney does a great breakdown of this because he knows this case very well. There's just this group of researchers, and they wanted to see if they could duplicate basically paranormal activity by just giving people the thoughts that there is something there. And it was basically so successful in doing so that they just stopped, because it was getting harder to prove that we weren't helpful in creating paranormal activity than the other way around, in terms of us just walking into it. So and I'm a big believer that of the energy not being like destroyed or created, but just transferred and, you know, changed. And so I do think like thought forms and stuff like that do exist, because if you build a lore to the point where people start like putting their actual like intentions on it, you know, if you believe in intentions in your daily life, like what's stopping something from being created? Slender Man is a great example of that.
Yeah.
Like the top hat entity is a really good example of that as well.
The Hat Man.
Yeah. And so like, you know, Slender Man was creepypasta. It didn't exist. And then it did. And that's because so many people put their intentions behind that. And then it was like, oh no, I'm having like real experiences with this shortly after reading the story. Because all these people are, and you know, there's all those experiments about like going out in deep water and then, you know, summoning a UFO and things like that. So there's by just sending out intentions, like we want to see a UFO, and then the UFO appears essentially. Or moving clouds away over the moon, and there's so many different things, you know.
We actually did something like that. I think I've talked about this. It might have even been the last episode you're on. We talked about. I know I've mentioned this on the show. We kind of did that at the summer camp I worked at, because someone, like one kid, said, "Oh, he saw a ghost," and it was like basically described the girl from The Ring, right, with the black hair and the white dress, and then all of a sudden, all these other kids were like, "Oh yeah, I saw it too. I saw it too." And then like randomly, like, "I saw it too." Like, and then there were like kids that, you know, on the other side of camp, like, "Yeah, I saw it." It started like this group think thing. Like everybody saw this one thing, and then they started looking it up, and they're like, they started finding random news things where it could be this, and it got to the point where they're like, "Oh, it's haunted." Then the kids were like in this area we called the tower, this like shed, this big like gymnasium type deal, like trying to summon stuff and do whatever. And then we actually got a counselor, and she had long black hair, and we put her in a white dress and got her to come through one of the doors to scare the shit out of the kids. It was actually really funny. But it got to the point where they were like really believing that like, oh, the camp's haunted. I was like, no, it's not. This one kid literally described the girl from The Ring, and you all ran with it. Like, it's not, it's all group think. You all think this. It's not real. But yeah, that ghost
anything that's like you're gonna try to do a study about it. The problem is that you don't have unfalsifiability when it comes to this, because you cannot, by the way that we as a society, I'm speaking like Western Europe, United States, probably Australia, like English-speaking Western society, the way that we think of the paranormal, the way that we think of ghosts specifically, you can't prove that they exist. So you do not have a possibility for unfalsifiability, which would give you like basically it's the safety of an experiment is falsifiability. So because you can't prove that they exist in the first place, anything that you prove, any finding that says like, oh well, we found we built this facility from scratch and we put these people in it and we told them that it was haunted, and then when they said it was haunted, it's like, well, that's not true because we built it from scratch, so there should be no ghosts. However, the way that we think of ghosts is like, well, maybe that ghost was attached to the land, maybe that ghost was attached to a specific building material or a specific person that was in it. So there's no like way that you can like pull all the variables out in order to get a really good point, unless the way that you're studying it is to see how the human mind can either be causing it to happen or building it itself, the mind building it itself. So like one of the things I saw lately is that the idea that a ghost is like ethereal, the way that we think of it, that you can kind of see through it and it could be gray or anything like that, that idea corresponds with when photography was invented, because the way that you get a picture of a ghost is you make it look ethereal and see-through and things like that. The way that ghosts were usually talked about in literature and through storytelling through other people before that point, most of the time it was you didn't see it at all, or it looked like a whole other person, a real life person. So like there is like this really interesting part of the human mind where it's like, I think I've explained on this show several times that like, I don't know if ghosts exist because I have never experienced anything like that, but I'm so interested in finding it out. Like I want to experience something. I don't think that people are lying when they're coming up, when they're telling these stories, because the people that I know who have told them, like I trust them. I trust them to be, telling their truth. So I want to know what they're experiencing, but it's not something I've ever experienced. So like, I'm so interested in the idea that like our brains are doing it to themselves because of matrixing and the way that we see, the way that we pick faces out in clouds and in tree bark and in grass and things like that, because that's how our brains work. But I don't think all of it can necessarily be explained in like, oh, the brain is just doing what the brain does and it's just a meat sack full of electricity and therefore like we could create our own ghosts. There's still something that people are experiencing that we can't explain. And any kind of study that you do on this, it's going to be so filled with like potholes, giant holes, and what we can possibly try to measure that like it's almost useless at this point because there's no like bottom to it. It just can keep going down.
So what we're gonna have to do? Oh, go ahead, Josh.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll keep this short. I'm a very long-winded young man.
You're the guest. You get to talk. Nelson talks all the time. Please talk.
I think I cover a lot of stories, and some of these I'm like, I guess you saw something maybe. But the only one that's really compelled me to the point where I could not explain it away was I think I told it on the last time I was here, but the one at the Prattville cotton gin plant where you had people seeing this lady in black, but then you had an event where like 50 plus factory workers all looked at the same entity walk across the shop floor and disappear. And they were all like, what did we just see? And they all saw it. And it was the same. And then you would have like mayors and law enforcement security guards like working together and doing stuff, like seeing this entity at the same time. And so it's like those instances where kind of, at least from if I'm picking up what you're putting down, where it's like there is something else going on that cannot be explained away from just like, us trying to make faces out of things that aren't human. Like that's something, and I still to this day, like so many people have said that they've seen that entity, like it's been caught on camera, like it's like one of those things, but it's so rare in my opinion that it happens that way, because there was really nothing that happened like on there besides like the death of the child and the death of the mother. But other than that, like so I agree with that point, largely because there's just some things that just can't be explained away like naturally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like, okay, so I wanted to ask, Mark, you're being pretty quiet. Do you have any ghost stories that you want to share with us tonight?
Well, not really, but
Mark is a ghost.
did y'all ever see that TikTok trend where people would? It was called, what was it? Like Rando Nautica or something like that.
Yeah, I did that a few
So
nights.
I did that with my brother, and like,
wait, just a second. Could you explain what it is? Because I don't remember seeing this.
Okay, so it's supposed to take like random numbers or something like that, and like find a coordinate near you, but you're supposed to put it like an intention of what you want to find. So if you wanted to find like a pink car, or a dead body, you just like, I don't know if you're supposed to say it out loud. We did. I got in the car with my brother and we were like, okay, we're both going to think really hard about something. And I let him pick. So he just said like a triangle. And so we like said triangle out loud a couple times. And like we were just picturing it really hard. And then you press like a randomized button and it'll find like somewhere near you. So it took me like 3 minutes up the road. And it'll give you an address and like drop the pin down and you're supposed to go to it. And like people would get out and walk around and look, and so it's like this abandoned house, and it had like a condemned thing on it, and I don't know if the app takes like survey information and finds places that it knows are condemned or like not lived in, but it had like the glass smashed out. It wasn't really trashed, it was just the glass is broken. We go into the backyard and there's a big metal like rebar like triangle, and so like that happened, and so it's like weird that it's just putting that intention out, like, and then a random app finding a number of something near you. Like the odds of that are weird, but not anything like traditionally like ghost or paranormal, just like coincidences of things that are almost like intentionally put there sometimes have happened to me. Or I'll dream of something and I don't know if it's the exact same as like deja vu, because I don't know if I actually like get that concept, but I'll dream of something and then like months, a year, whatever later, I can like remember the feeling of something leading up to it and like picture like a memory of it, and then it'll happen, or it'll happen like almost in a similar way, like it was like fated to be. So I don't know if that's the exact definition of deja vu, or if it's just like, oh yeah, I've like been in a similar situation before, but it's like I couldn't like anticipate something that's gonna happen, or if it's just me being like, oh yeah, I think that's gonna happen, and then trick myself into being like, yeah, I knew this was going to happen because I dreamt it.
Mark's just straight up Final Destinationing us like, we can't get in the car. We can't go to the aquarium. So get off the plane.
But I haven't had like, well, I've had the like sensation of something like sitting or shifting on my bed by my legs or my feet. But it wasn't like a person, it was more like an animal, like a dog or a cat, like jumping on the bed. But not anything like, it's just like for a split second catches me off guard, but I know that there's not like a dog or a cat in the room. But other than that, I haven't felt any like weird or heard anything weird. Even being in places that are supposedly like spooky. Like there's a theater downtown where a little girl supposedly got like ran over by a wagon when she ran outside. And then, but no. Rome's full of like little like weird things like that, but I think it's just old timey like,
and Marjorie
yeah,
Taylor
people
Greene
died because it's like unsafe.
scare people.
Yeah,
Marjorie Taylor Greene, the
her
ghost.
scarecrow, her scarecrow-like body.
Have you been to Cave Spring?
Yeah, I've been to Cave Springs.
Gotcha.
Nothing happened.
Well, like no, like I haven't been. Like the buildings are old, so like you take a step inside of them and you feel like the whole thing's gonna like crash in on you anyway. Like,
That checks out.
so it's weird. Like there's an antique store where this lady has so much crap. She's got like a whole like huge room, but it's like maybe 3 feet across because she's got like a dresser and like a boudoir and like a baker's cabinet lining each side, and it twists and turns, and there's like glass figurines and junk everywhere. But well, okay, I said I'd never. Speaking about
Here we
antiques,
go. I knew if we dug, we'd find something.
Yeah,
Here
hold
we
on.
go.
Like I spend a lot of
Spooky
time
Mark.
in like antique stores, and I've gotten like the bad vibe of like, maybe don't touch that, maybe don't pick that up, maybe don't go to this corner of this part of the antique store before. But it hasn't been like anything like would be in a movie, like there's like a glow around like a vase or something. It's just like
Bum,
it
bum, bum.
feels like heavy in places. But also I don't know if that's just like there's a volume of junk, and so it feels like maybe this is a more like fragile place to stand in because you might the mass and gravity of the other objects, if that makes sense. But
Wow.
yeah,
Very interstellar.
I don't know. It's just like I haven't had like
Interstellar
a like a little ghost kid like tap me on the shoulder or and like hear like footsteps or anything. It's just been like vibes of, yeah, maybe I shouldn't be in here longer than I need to be.
So
Oh, go ahead, Nelson.
no, I was to say I've ran Nautica before when it was like the trend, right? So that was also, remember that's the one where those kids ran Nautic, and I think they dead body and they
Oh, the
found
suitcase.
they found the dead body in the suitcase
Yeah.
in Seattle or whatever. That was like, oh shit. And then like there's TikToks and you can see videos of people on YouTube like Randonautica and then showing up a place and like some lady chases them with a knife, and there was another one where they randomly on some random open area in the woods and some dude just runs out like, hey, what are you, like, you know, chase them away. It's probably
Trespassing. So then
you're probably trespassing, yeah. And then sometimes they'll find like, what is this weird thing in the woods, blah 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 blah, and it's like how much of that was like planted and how much of it was like true.
Yeah.
The suitcase with the dead body in it, that's probably what launched it, because everyone was like, oh my god, they did. It was like really just fucking coincidence, right? Anyone would have probably found that suitcase washed up on the shore and been like, man, this smells like shit.
Right,
And,
because it got you outside, and then you're looking for something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I ran a Nautica with my friend Rick, and we were like, oh, dead body, like just like screaming in the phone, dead body, and it
Sounds
took us
about
to
white.
like exactly.
What is wrong with you?
Because like it's bullshit. Like it took us like around to like the city dump, and I was just like, this is
There's
fucking
probably a
weird.
body in there.
Well,
Hell yeah, brother. No, it's a place.
Nelson, don't make me bring
it's-
the mood down, because I
it's,
will in
uh,
a second.
It's
To be
really it was
fair-
just a take on, it was a take on capitalism. There was so many dead bodies of like just
To be-
junk that humans just waste so much. So I took us to the dump.
To be fair, where you live, that's very plausible.
This is in Montgomery, and it's true. It probably could have been. It definitely probably could have been some dead bodies. But then we
Very
also went to
plausible.
Bear Creek Swamp and like rode up and down the road. The time you're supposed to be like, hey, you out here? We got your baby. Like trying to like, you know, whatever, and it's just like nothing. I mean, Tyler,
that's how like,
old
a
host
movie
has said
gets
he's
made about
ran
you.
through Bear Creek Swamp before just running around. Like it's I think the Randonautica app, it just generates random points, and sometimes you find weird shit and sometimes you don't. It's just like, you know, just random. But like there was some crazy shit. Mark's shit was pretty crazy. The dead body one was crazy. The finding just random shit. But I think what we said, like there was said, like it gets you out and exploring, and however much of it is planted or however much of it you just randomly find something, because it gets you out of the house into the streets exploring, you're gonna find some weird shit. But yeah, the app was kind of funny. I mean, it was like, you know, it gave you something to do, got you out of the house. It was like, yeah, let's go do something fun. Maybe we'll see something spooky.
Find a dead
Ooh.
fucking body.
Dead
What's wrong with
body.
you?
Yeah.
Ah.
Me and my brother were like a shape, and you're like dead body, dead body.
Yeah, and we got taken on a wild goose chase to like nowhere, and you got some creepy ass house with a triangle. That's
This
that's
is a normal
creepy.
house.
I'm not.
Who
at
knows
least
what
it
that
was
triangle
condemned.
was for?
It was like a condemned
Well, I mean,
house.
Someone lived there at one
I'm saying,
point.
yours was creepy. Mine was just like took us to the fucking dump. And it's like, oh, okay. I guess this is a metaphor for something, or there is a multiple dead bodies in this dump. I mean, fuck it.
There's one thing that I want to like touch on, and I want to get everybody's opinion on this. Because basically, like, okay, we'll start from the premise that what is the United States and Canada has been inhabited for thousands of years, and therefore it should have, if ghosts the way that we think of them exist, it should have thousands of years of ghosts, possibly. However, when Americans talk about ghosts, they're talking about ghosts from the recorded, settled period of time, where most places in the United States, disregarding a very small section of New England, your buildings and your infrastructure are no more than about 200 years old. So when they talk about ghosts, they're usually talking about something from like the mid 1800s on, when you should have like thousands of years of ghosts. And there was something that I brought up with my mom one time, that like, if we're supposed to have these thousands of years of ghosts, and the majority of that should be people who are indigenous to this area, how come we never hear people talking about indigenous ghosts? And that's when she brought up like, oh, there used to be like, it was always an Indian burial ground. It was ghost Indians that they saw all the time. And that has kind of fallen out of fashion in, I would say, the last 20 or so years. I think even in the 80s, we'd still see movies where like the culprit was an Indian burial ground.
Pet
like,
Cemetery.
And Poltergeist was an Indian burial ground. And like, so it's okay. So that would be 30 years, probably about the last 30 years. It's kind of fallen out of fashion to have that. But I also want to bring up the fact that like, I grew up in the States. I grew up in Florida, where I probably had not been in a building except for St. Augustine, which is the oldest European inhabited city in what is now the US. I probably had not been in a building that was any older than about 150 years old. And now I live in Europe, where recorded history is thousands of years. Where I live now, the road that's outside of my neighborhood is called Danes Camp Road, because there were Viking settlements outside over 1,000 years ago. So like, there's thousands of years of history here. But still, when we talk about ghosts, even in this country, you could get back to maybe the Elizabethan era, so we're talking about 500 years maybe, but you're not talking about the spirits of like the Iceni who were here 2,000 years ago. We're not talking about Romans very often. Most of the time it's like Victorian on. But you have more of a history of talking about very old settlements here, but it's still like you only hear stories about much more recent ghosts. And that does make me question, like, well, okay, if ghosts are real and they happen the way we think they happen, where are all these thousands of years of ghosts that we don't talk about?
Roman ghosts are too busy fucking each other to like show up.
Nelson, my God.
You're like a random
Hey,
moan.
Mamma
That's how they
mia,
haunt
I'm a
you?
ghost. Boo.
I,
Oh no, Pompeii, it blew up. Oh no.
I actually have a pretty good thought about this, because as I've said before, like the reason why I started telling like Alabama and like Southern ghost stories and urban legends is mainly because that same reason. Like it was always like, oh, like it was a slave who was hung, or like it was like this great plantation master, and quotations on the great, and he haunts his house because he loved it so much, and it's always stories like those. But speaking of Florida, when you get to Florida, there is one story that sticks out to me, and it kind of, I think this theme fits across the board. It always seems like the older spirits that have been here for a long time are always like animal based, and I find that interesting because like the Florida skunk ape is one of the most prevalent urban legends and myths, and I mean, I guess you can call it's more of a cryptid than it goes, but nonetheless, I think that the philosophy still applies. This is something that has been talked about for thousands of years. So it didn't just start with, like the settlers coming to Florida and being like, hey, let's make up some Monkey in the Woods.
God. That feels a lot more racist than it had to, but okay.
It's like the old Indian burial ground fell out of style. It's like, there's a monkey in the woods. There's a monkey in the woods that came from an old Indian burial ground. It's like, let's see how problematic we can get.
But it's plausible, but nonetheless, like, you start researching that story and you see that like the indigenous cultures were talking about this specific entity, and also treading very lightly here because like I'm only talking about this because I researched the Florida skunk game and I had to.
Josh, we know you're an expert on indigenous culture.
Shut up, Nelson. Let him talk. God,
we're an episode now. We did it.
And so you have that, and so you look back and like the recorded history, it just says, yeah, we knew about the skunk game. Yeah, it's been here. Here's the characteristics that it's always had. And then you start seeing the European settlers like picking up on the story and having their own encounters, and then going into modern culture. My belief is that urban legends and ghost stories reflect the majority of who's in power in a society. So when like you start really digging down and like, like what are the actual ghosts that have been here for a long time? Like I said, a lot of them are animal by nature, like dog man, stuff like that that people see. But I look at it in the same vein as like Christianity and like Jesus, essentially. Like the group in power said we need a Jesus that looks like us. So let's paint this man and let's use this as a symbol of what Jesus looks like. And that's that, and then you bring that to the United States, and now like that's also, better, where he's from, but now you're looking at that, and now you take on those tropes that this is what Jesus looks like. Now we're gonna fast forward, it's in all the media, it's in all the, so I think that from like a storytelling standpoint, the same thing applies in a way. Like as a Black person, like we have stories about ghosts and stuff, but they get buried down, and all of them are just labeled as like just enslaved stories. Like they got hung. They, Sally Mae saw, this enslaved man, and they had a kid, and he got killed, and so now he haunts and walks the land. When in reality, there was a lot of tragedy in a lot of these places, and so this is my long-winded answer to say I think it just fits the socio like cultural movements of the time. And I have a really good example for this. Like there's a place here called Spring Villa. Everybody knows about the story. They all say, yeah, there's a mad slave and he killed his master on the 13th step. Blood stain appears. But in reality, it's like, for one, like historically, it doesn't fit. Part two, like this was a story created in the 30s for 4-H camps to scare people. It was just close enough for you to be able to tell a story about something that was like, 60, 70 years ago for children to believe, and you can always just pinpoint it on a slave. Like a slave did it. Like, of course he, and then you're thinking like, yeah, of course they probably did. If I was in chains, I'd do it too. But in reality, that perpetuates an urban legend that we still carry to this day. And so that was just part of the movement. And the savagizing of minorities as well. So I think that's why we get just so many just like old, and for lack of a better term, old white people ghost stories. Like it's, Carrie Elizabeth walks around the house, but like there's other things going on here, and it's just like, well, why does she walk? Maybe it's not Carrie Elizabeth, yada yada. So that's my long-winded answer. I'll stop talking now. But
I think that's beautiful. That's really like it's really interesting because when my mom was saying like, oh well, this story of like the old Indian burial ground or the Indian ghosts, when she would have been learning them would have been the 60s. So the idea of the quote unquote Wild West, a Wild West where Indians were specifically the antagonists to the settlers, was only about 60 years gone at this point. The Wild West is actually a lot closer than a lot of people remember or realize. Yeah, like up until probably like the 1920s, there were still areas where that was very common. So that only 40 years difference. So when you have like that crossed with the golden age of the Western, the penny Westerns that were novels, and then you had movies and then TV eventually coming out with Westerns being such a hugely in demand concept that if you need an antagonist, it's gonna be Indians, because it's like they're still the antagonist IRL basically for them up until that point. But yeah, like it also got what you were saying got me thinking about I can't remember the ghost name, but the Myrtles Plantation that like everybody heard about in that's in Louisiana, where Chloe was her name. It was an enslaved woman named Chloe who was working in the house, and she wanted to get back at whoever, so she put oleander leaves in a cake for one of the children's birthdays, and the children ate the cake, but Chloe was supposed to know the antidote, but they ended up eating too much and the children died, and et cetera, and Chloe ended up getting killed, murdered, and like all this stuff. And like, yeah, so that does, like, it's something that I had never purposely thought of, that like, okay, so we have to explain the death of the innocent white children, so we're going to make sure that it's a black person, that's an enslaved person, who is going to be blamed for this, and end up making this story, be it true or not at this point. That like, yeah, that's not something I'd ever thought of, because I'd always thought of it from like my own, like the indigenous perspective, but I should be thinking about it from other perspectives as well, especially other minorities. But yeah, that's a really interesting answer.
But I will say though, like from the indigenous perspective, like I'm very big on like trying to take away the savagizing of that. So like the indigenous burial grounds kind of trope was actually like formed to help ghost hunting at a time where it was starting to become a thing. And so once you have some power players like kind of push that narrative too, well, what was once just like, you know, a talking point is now like, oh no, like ghostly activity is associated with indigenous people, because indigenous people aren't Christian believing by in the way that we think, so or at all, and so they're doing like their savage things, and so that's gonna make the land mystical, and we've disturbed the mystical land from the savage indigenous people who, dress like this and walk like this and talk like this and sound so unintelligent with their languages to us, profound, like settled people, and so it kind of like it kind of like rolls downhill. And I've seen so many people, like even here, like as I'm telling stories, people, oh, don't forget, like that place was built on an Indian burial ground, and I'm like, well, actually, that has nothing to do with this story at all, as a matter of fact. And so, like, let's really break down like why this place could be haunted. And I can promise you, it probably does not have to do anything about it in the like indigenous culture at all. So, but of course, like you said, here, like there were still like indigenous settlements going into the 30s and 40s, like, and so you have like the westerns coming out, the black and white westerns, showing a specific image, and then you pair that up with like ghost stories, and you just have the perfect trope for people who want to take the hottest thing going and then make it theirs. And so I think that's another, like, so it's not even just from like the black perspective, it's just from like a majority perspective, and you still see that trope today, but that's yeah, it's so that's why
all ghost stories are racist.
I was about to go on a rant, but I stopped myself.
No, keep going. Go on the rant. Do it. Rant.
But I really do think that sometimes people need to see themselves in their stories, and so that changes the storytelling aspect from what could have actually been a true account to something that was fabricated to fit like affirmation and validation that this is why. And I think that's changed the context of some stories, because I know like the real story of Spring Villa, but I've told people the real story, but they persist on telling that specific story because that's the one that they like, because that's the one that's more affirmed in a public setting. So now like it's socially acceptable to know this story as opposed to the real one, which isn't always as fun. So you take some of the fun out of it by being like, hey, like it kind of sucked around here, and that's not the story, and it's haunted, but like it's not for that reason. So
What's the real story?
So the real story,
this is the one with the 13th step, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Also, the spooky numbers in there, so.
Ooh.
And that's the thing. Like, of course, it's a 13th step. Like, the real story is that this man named William Young came to Opelika, basically. It's assumed that he made a ton of money off the gold rush. So he came, he wanted to build a house. He wanted a huge plantation in a place where it was like, that was the thing. And he did. He got a 455-acre plot of land. He commissioned a house to be built. He also like bought a company with this money that he got. He was a trash human. Like, he was a piece of garbage. And he actually did treat his like slaves horribly, like horrifically. So number one, there's a lot of tragedy on this land. Because anytime you have like really brutal slave masters, you usually have a lot of really brutal deaths and things. So but the story actually doesn't. The story assumes that this happened sometime while he was like owning slaves, but it's on record that he died of natural causes. So he wasn't stabbed by a slave at all. It was like 14 to 16 years after slavery had ended, and we all know, like, you know, a decade or so like after the emancipation, like some people were still able to own slaves because the news hadn't traveled that far yet. But nonetheless, it was like 14 years after. It's on record that he died of natural causes. Nobody really knows why the place is haunted, and that's what nobody wants to say, because there has to be a story. There's no record that he was stabbed or anything. I think he literally died of like choleric, if I'm not mistaken. Like, that's it. Like, it's not fancy.
He caught the fever. He
and
died of something that people died. He had a cough and died, or he stubbed his toe or something random.
It was really like he got a paper cut and it got like infected and he died. It's literally what it was. But like, this is all on record. Like, you can check his gravestone. He was buried on the property. Like, all of this. But that's it. That's the story of this place. That's it. It's not fancy. It's not fun. It's objective. It's straight to the point. It's historically accurate. But there is activity that happens on this place, and nobody knows where it comes from. And then you go back, and now people say, "Oh, well, you know, this is where the indigenous people live. So, like, he probably built his house on the indigenous burial ground." Also not true. Like, it's just not true. This was an important geographical location, on record, like historically fact. I've been doing some looking around this area. Historical fact. And it followed the Uchi Creek, and like that was like their territory. That's where they stayed. I mean, like pretty much the rest of the United States. Also, it's funny how like people pick and choose like where the burial grounds are, as if like normal people who are not a part of the culture would actually know where that is. That's neither here nor there.
Right. Could you explain to me their funerary customs that it specifically said that there'd be burial grounds and not tree burials or cremations or anything like that?
Literally anything else.
Yeah.
There's an indention in the ground. It looks like a mound. This has to be a burial ground.
Which is a whole nother like. That's a whole nother rant I could go on, where people like impose themselves into cultures and be like, yeah, that's it right there. But it's like, how would you know? Like, yeah. Whose family line did you come
I'm
from to know?
1/16 Cherokee, I know.
But that's neither here nor there. But you know, there is like a haunting that takes place in the home, and it has nothing to do with like indigenous people. It has nothing to do with black people at all. It's just kind of random. And then like 3 girls died on the property. People see like a Bigfoot creature on the property. So it's just like a place where like paranormal things like to hang out. That's it. Like, it's not fancy. It is what it is. People assume that these things are linked, but the story is just not fun. And I think that's another part of that as well. Like, people feel like they need something to make it fun, which is why they'll go find like, and this is no shade to anybody, but like they'll go and find an influencer who has like 16 million followers, or maybe 16 million is a lot, maybe like 3 million followers, and they're like, yeah, I didn't tell you guys, my ring light's haunted, or you know, and then because
the ring light,
and you're like, this has no substance at all. But you know, the real story is like, my ring light's not haunted. and I have a boring room, but nobody wants the boring room story. They want like tell me like how the ring light was flashing when you were watching the ring, and then that she crawled through the hole of the ring light and grabbed you by the collar.
Sadako!
So,
not the ring light, I told you.
Subscribe to my OnlyFans,
and so that's why I feel like, to answer your question, and also another very long-winded way, I think some of the fun is taken out when you start actually telling the stories historically, and then adding the paranormal, as opposed to telling the paranormal and then just sprinkling the historic back.
It reminds me of that Boondocks episode with Ketcha Freeman. I was like, they make up stuff to like fit a narrative, and it's just I really like what you said. That really makes a lot of sense, that like stuff is made up to fit a narrative. And I always wondered, like, places of like great tragedy are some of the least, like, you don't hear anything about ghost stories there. Like, you don't hear about ghost stories at the One World Trade Center, right? Where like 3,000 people died on 9. You don't hear the ghosts that haunt the former World Trade Center. Like, you don't hear about that. You don't hear about like ghosts at Auschwitz. It's like you don't hear about places that you would think where great tragedies happened, that there would be angry spirits. And I don't know, like, I've said this before on the podcast, and I don't know where the quote came originally, probably on Twitter or something, but someone was like, if ghosts are real and they can hurt you, white people wouldn't exist. And it's just like these places where you suspect where great tragedies happen, a great loss of life, they would be some sort of like residual, like some or paranormal stuff, but there's not. And it's really just like, it goes back to what y'all were saying, that you pick and choose like where something's going to be that's going to be paranormal. And it's
right, like is that too disrespectful to some people to imply that there could be something like that?
Yeah,
like those people couldn't move on. It's too like disrespectful.
It's like what Josh says. Like, obviously that story was made up to scare white people into thinking, oh, black people are still out for revenge. Like this slave brutally stabbed his slave master, and in the 30s you're telling this to kids, and in their mind they're thinking, like, they're equating black man stabbing white man to death, and they're just like still like, it's a racist narrative of like keeping that savagery alive. Like this, it plays into the myth and the stereotype that black men are overly aggressive, et cetera, and it fits that narrative in a way to like push this racist stereotype without actually saying it out loud. And I really, when you said that, I was like, holy shit, there's how many ghost stories are actually like that. It's just like, wow. And when Kai was like with the ancient Indian burial ground, it's just like, how many of that is just like a trope that white people made up in order to keep this narrative going?
I think you're getting really, really close to something that has just been like percolating in my mind, that maybe this is what we've been saying all along and it's just clicked finally. But like the existence of ghost stories, if we take the idea of them being real or not out completely, the fact that we have these ghost stories, if we're going to go with the United States in particular, because that's what all of us know at this point, that ghost stories are kind of a wrangling and luridization of history. So if you take the idea of these stories up until the last 30 years, if we go with the Indian burial ground thing, if you make Native Americans, you make indigenous people the aggressors, the bad guys in this, and then you have the idea of these stories put on top. So one, you're reinforcing the idea that indigenous people are all dead, that we only exist in burial grounds. Two, if you have any of your other stories being from the 1850s onwards, you're reinforcing the idea that European settlers, that white people, are the original people of this area, right? So you're taking out the entire history of indigenous people unless they are the aggressors. Three, what Josh was saying, when you have these stories of like, okay, so we have activity happening in this area, but we've created this ghost story out of whole cloth, the luridization of history, that like, instead of the history being very mundane and that chattel slavery happened, people were brutalized for it, however, this particular bit of activity cannot be explained in this way. You're just taking that history and making it more lurid, making it something that you want to peek at without saying like, oh well, I'm definitely rubbernecking this accident, but I can peek at it through this ghost story. I can look at this idea of this brutal part of history without actually having to like take any responsibility for it or feel any of the ramifications for it. So it's kind of transgressing what is good and moral and healthy as far as we're concerned as people in a settler state in the United States, and you're turning it into something that you can play with, that you can sprinkle on, that you can make your heroes and your villains, that you can write your own history without having to have any proof for it. Like there's like you don't have to say that, oh well, we've definitely taken this land from indigenous people and that's why they're out to get us, like you don't have to think about that. You can just say, oh, this is a burial ground and that's why my spoons fly out of the drawer every day. Like that's like, it's really
not my spoon.
We particularly hate spoons. I'm telling you right now, any Indian in your house, we are taking your spoons away.
No, the Indian in the cupboard stole my spoon.
But yeah, just like it had me thinking while you're talking about this that like it's really fun to tell ghost stories. It's really fun to kind of sit here and in like where I am right now, it's dark out and I have my lights down and everything and talk about ghost stories. But when you're thinking about the base history of it, and I think this actually also has something to do with we touched upon it I think before we started recording, Josh, that minorities have a much harder time breaking into talking about horror, be it true horror or fiction or whatever. But when we get involved in it, it necessarily gains another level that white audiences don't want to hear, that it makes it too uncomfortable. So yeah, all of it's tying together. My brain octopus is really getting on this. Let's go.
We have just canceled ghost stories.
I thought of something too. Another way.
Any other ghost stories?
Since we're an anti-Catholic podcast as well, I wonder if the concept of like purgatory and the like wandering forever has something to do with the like Victorian and like what's the other one? The one that's like before that. Is it Edward?
Edwardian is after Victorian.
Okay, after it.
The Elizabethan era.
Like that.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Jacobite, Georgian, Victorian, Edwardian, modern era.
Like that kind of like Puritan whatever is part of the reason why some of it starts at that too. Like that, like you think of a ghost, it's like old lady in like a long dress, frilly shirt, whatever. Like hair up, like, kind of thing.
Yeah. And to add to that point, I have a really great example about the hearing the ghost stories but not taking the responsibilities for it, but also kind of making it entertaining so that you don't actually grasp the reality of what took place. And that is St. Augustine, Florida. More specifically, and I don't have like a vendetta against the old jail or nothing, but this is like the fourth time I've brought them up.
Let's go. I fucking love St. Augustine. I've spent so much time there. Give it to me. Tell me the story.
I personally love the ghost tour. The ghost tour was really informative. It was really history driven. But the singular history ghost tour that we took at the jail was kind of off-putting. It made me really uncomfortable because like you go up there and you're like, they're like, here's a general store and here's a jail, like you better watch out, you're gonna get put in here. When in reality, this place was not a good place, and they make it so campy and lighthearted. And we were, to be completely transparent, we were the only two black people there, which that doesn't bother us because we go to ghost tours everywhere, and we usually are anyways. But the difference here was like, you have the sheriff, and he's just like walking around, and it's like, oh yeah, we're gonna have a good time, like touring this jail where people died and stuff inside, and like, because we were trash humans. And then we take the tour and they're just like so just giddy and laughing and making jokes, when this was a place where the chain gang got started. This is a place where a lot of like legal slavery got its first roots and spread throughout the country. This is a place where prisoners were, some of them weren't even supposed to be in there. They just would literally like just find like black people off the street essentially and just lock them up, like just for any minor thing. Oh, you stepped on the sidewalk wrong, well, time to go to jail. And they would be there. And then like even like the smallest disturbance, they're getting put in like isolation, basically dungeons, no sound, no light, nothing. So like, but they're just hee-hawing about this. And then you go up to the jails and you see like how tight they were, how cramped it was. You hear about all the problems they had with food and things like that. And they're just like, hey, take a picture in the jail. Like that could be you, but it's not. Oh, and sometimes we have ghosts here. And me and my wife just looked at each other. We're just like, is this really like taking place right now while we're on this tour? Because there's no way they're like laughing about the chain gang being started or how terrible like the jail, like the head, like I forget what it's called, the warden was. Like he was a bad person. And they're just like, yeah. And he was cool. He's like 6'2", he was big, he didn't take no mess. But in reality, his didn't take no mess was like brutal. It was brutality. But they were like on a constant cycle of hanging people. But like I said, it was so campy. It was like watching like the 80s Batman. And it was like it was disturbing because this is an opportunity to really teach people what the reality was, not too far ago, and that this is where really bad things in the United States were formed. But you're taking pictures in the jail cells and just like laughing about people being thrown in solitary, being like, "Hi, you wouldn't want to be in there, would you?" It's weird, but that mentality I think has been spread through our ghost stories, so that you can kind of if you add some paranormal, you can just like digest it. You don't really have to face reality. We're not going to add any real history into it. We're just going to throw some history and then get to the ghost story. And there you go. No responsibility. Like, you don't have to think about it. Like, because ghosts, am I right? Like, so that's a really great example of what you're talking about. Like the luridity. I don't know if that's the word, but I'm just going to say it. The luridity of these ghost stories, and how they can actually set up horror narratives for the future. And
my mom and I had almost the exact same reaction that you and your wife did going in there. Really? So I'm from Orlando. My family still lives there. I loved going to St. Augustine since I was a kid, because like when you're in Central Florida, a lot of times one of your first memorable field trips is going to St. Augustine, because it's a very old. I'm sorry. Did I break then?
For a little bit. For
my
a little bit.
Audio break?
No, you're good.
Okay, so one of your first field trips is to go to St. Augustine, because it's very, very old. It's like 500 years old now. And so like when I was an adult and I got to decide like where we're taking our family vacation this year, because I was the one paying for it, I said, oh, why don't we go to St. Augustine? So I took my family up there, and my mom and my husband and I were the ones who were doing most of the touring. My dad likes to hang out by the beach. So we went to the old jail. I had never been to it before. All the times I went to St. Augustine, I'd never been to the old jail before. And I remember this really distinct feeling, because I am a fourth generation Indigenous entertainer educator. 4 generations of my family have worked in Western theme parks, dinner theaters, doing shows for paying customers before. And when you walk into the old jail area, it's like you're walking into a Hollywood set. It's like the dirt road, the people are dressed like old cowboys. You hear the boots on the boardwalk and everything, the old general store with like the old rock candy and all that. And it feels like you're walking into a set, like a costumed set. Yeah. And so it was weird for both of us, because we both recognized that. We recognized that like, this is a set, this is a theme park kind of thing that's set in the place where there was a real jail where people died. And I remember like the entire time walking around with her, and it would be like they're telling the stories of like, oh, people get thrown in here, but they never got as far as saying, but who were the ones that they were doing this to? Unless it's like one specific guy who was really weird, like some murderer that they caught and then they put him in there. Like they don't talk about who's the one that they're doing this to.
And then at like the top part of the jail, like you'll see the pictures, but you've been quote unquote entertained so much, you don't even put 2 and 2 together that this was a jail full of Black people.
Yeah.
Like almost exclusively. Like, and you see like the ankle, like the chain gang, like anchors, I guess that's what you call them, like on their feet, like taking pictures like side by side, or like pictures of them cramped up on each other. But you're just kind of like, oh yeah, look at this is a cool new type of gel that this person built specifically here, and they started making all the or all the high gels like this, and like, you know, like, because they trap you with that, and you're like, oh, I want to know who built the gels. Oh, that's cool steel. And meanwhile, the pictures are literally surrounding you about how brutal this place was, and and so that is a very great point. They never once said this was an all. I did not know that was an all black gel until for when I looked at the pictures, and I immediately Googled on my phone. I said, Kima, I think, like, and that's my wife saying, I was like, I think this was like a gel for like us. And so I Googled, and I was like, oh, wow. So they just really are just gonna just edit that part out so that you don't have to feel it or think about it.
Mm-hmm. Like, there's to go on to another point, because I do have a couple of stories that I could tell, but since we're going to focus on the South, in St. Augustine a second time, the Castillo de San Marcos, which is just down the street from the old jail, is a 500-year-old fort. It's very interesting if you're interested in military history. This sounds really horrible, it's coming out of my mouth, but if you're interested in settlements in Florida, about Europeans coming over for the very first time and making it to the continental United States and everything, and it's one of the oldest places that has been continuously used, because one is the European settlement in the United States at this point. So it's really old compared to most things that Americans are used to. And they do costume days where people are dressed in the uniforms of British, Spanish, and American soldiers, because it's been occupied by all of these countries at one time or another. And one of the things that they tell you about, and I'll give the Castillo this, that because it's a national monument, they have to kind of talk about what happened to indigenous people in this area. They have to, because they can't get away with not doing it at this point. But there's certain casements, so that the bottom areas of this fort, they're built a little bit like wine cellars, curved ceilings, dark, dank, almost underground, and they're called casements. And it was used as a prison for a very long time for prisoners of war and all of these wars and everything. One of the last groups of prisoners that came through there were Apache freedom fighters. So this was right at the end of the 1800s. Geronimo was there for a short amount of time. They eventually moved him up to Alabama. And a lot of his freedom fighters were held at the Castillo for a certain amount of time. And they have to talk about this. They have to, because they can't get away with it at this point. But it never seems to sink in very much. And the Castillo is another place where people talk about it being hugely haunted and all of these different kind of ghosts from hundreds of years of history. But there was a moment when my mom and I were walking out. There's a drawbridge, because there's a dry moat, but there's a moat to it. And I stopped my mom, and I was holding her hand, and I told her, like, I want us to think about this moment, that we are allowed to walk out of this place freely when our ancestors could only be let out in chains in this place, who died here. And it's this huge, like, this cannonball to the chest feeling that if you want to talk about ghosts, and they do talk about Indian ghosts being there, that we're the ones who have survived this and this history. Like, so when you're talking about, like, oh, we don't talk about ghosts being at the World Trade Center and everything, I think there's a certain element that when you talk about Auschwitz and you talk about the World Trade Center, it's too near. There's too many people who are alive who still remember it. And I would give it maybe a generation or two more before Auschwitz is definitely getting it, and the World Trade Center is going to get this. That, like, because the Indian Wars are over 100 years removed now, you can tell these stories and it doesn't affect a lot of people unless you are one of the literal survivors, who you can look back and go, like, my great grandmother is the correct age to be one of the children of Geronimo's generation. So we are walking out of here freely when possibly our relatives couldn't. And I don't think any of the white people who were there touring that day, and again, I love a living history encampment, I love seeing this stuff, but they're not interacting with it at that deep level. That a ghost story they're still not going to get that feeling. Whereas for us, we feel something from it. And anybody who's a minority in horror, if they're using those real life events, you're going to be reacting differently to it. You're going to be remembering more than the dominant kind of class is going to be talking about at the time. But yeah, like St. Augustine is a wild trip. Did you get one of those? They handed out papers that were like your freedom papers at the jail. That was so fucked up.
We literally
yikes
did not stay. We just got in our rental car and just left because I was just like, I cannot physically, like, at the very least pretend that you don't have them when we come through. Like, good God, like, Jesus, read the room, y'all.
Yeah, so for anybody who's not aware, there's this like little yellow, kind of like it's supposed to look like parchment, I guess, little yellow sheet of paper that's like you can write your name on it, and it's like, oh, you're free from the jail, kind of thing. It's horrible.
I was like, I could fight everybody in this place right now, like,
and I will.
The ghost will have your back. It's like, yeah,
it's absolutely insane. Like the level of like the level of the lack of self-awareness too. But you know, it's funny that you say that you had that experience at like the fort. I had that same experience at my, like, this is not a shameless like plug. This is very real. I have that same experience at my coffee shop. I'll go there in the morning sometimes, and I'll just sit and just be like, wow, like I own a business in a place where, I mean, 60 years ago, I couldn't be caught alive walking down here because I better not. Like, and it's just wild, kind of like that, just like taking that in. That wasn't even like, that was like my grandmother's generation. She could not go to like downtown Opelika and be in the same place. And like the same thing for Birmingham. Like I have family there too, and it's just so weird to see, like, but it's also it's really sombering, but it's also why I think that sometimes we need more minorities in the space, because there's just a different perspective, because there's that real like visceral, like guttural, like, I 70 years ago would not be allowed to walk this same sidewalk in this same place and feel safe, first of all, but own something on top of that. And people come to me who from every different walk of life, you know, and at the same thing, like, and I wish that, and that's what's needed in like the paranormal as a whole. I think more people from different backgrounds being able to tell the same story but from their different perspectives to create a full, well-rounded story where everybody gets to play their part, whether it's good or bad, but we all walk away and that's the story, not something that somebody needs to change to fit like a certain group, or like, but brings that levity to some of these places, because some of these, like, the history needs to be taught. Like, it's not fun. Some of these are really heavy. They're not fun to tell. Like the asylum stories in Alabama are some of the worst stories to tell. They are not fun. But like, and there's tons of like ghosts, but like if you don't tell the brutality of it, then you'll never think of the perspective of the ghost who might be there, or the person who might still be walking there, who might still be feeling the same effects of what they endured when they were there alive. Like that's that's why my biggest gripe for the old jail, it doesn't give people that opportunity to do that. You just kind of take it and you just leave. Tee-hee. And then you go get some pancakes across the street. Yeah, pretty much. And then go, you know, to the Fountain of Youth and then just, ha, DeSoto, ha. And then you're gone.
Fountain Youth pissed me off. They had Indian actors there that were clearly white people. I was like, oh man. My mom had to hold me back.
Which is also like the real story of that. Also wild. Like, and they just kind of just brush over it. I'm just like, that's a whole. I'm not okay. I'm gonna stop.
That'll be Halloween. Our Halloween episode next year. We're gonna be talking more shit on ghost stories.
Yeah. I get started very easily now. Yeah, I'm a little bit more passionate than I was when I was first on the show.
Yeah,
we love it. Love that.
We love it.
Any other stories for this episode, you guys?
What do you got, Mark? That's what it is. Mark's the quietest ones.
You
Like, what do
think?
you got, Mark?
I don't know. Well, sometimes I'm just like, we joke about me being like
Okay.
in my own little thing and like being like the feral cat energy or whatever. Anything could set me off. Like, I don't know. I get bad vibes all the time and just leave. I Irish goodbye all the time. I'm like, okay, I'm done here, and like go.
Mark, that Chili's we went to was not haunted.
Yeah,
could have been.
No, it wasn't.
It was the health inspector they killed to keep that place open.
Oh my god.
Like the
You were just
window
mad you
sills, like,
couldn't.
rotting.
We made fun of you for wanting chicken nuggets for chicken tendies.
You know what? It's okay. I don't
Snap
know.
out of it.
I will say I do have an actual ghost story. I have a few,
Oh,
but I have
let's
an
hear it.
actual ghost story.
Let's close out with a ghost story. Come
Yeah,
on.
let's close out with a ghost story.
And it actually has to do with my coffee shop. So when we first got the coffee shop, like this building was built in the 80s, like the 1880s. So it's very old. And it still has it has
The
that-
80s.
The 80s. Like, I was like, oh, you know, the 1880s.
I am the same vintage as this coffee shop.
and
Duran Duran playing in the background.
and it still has like its old bricks and everything. So like it's old. Like if you touch it, like the bricks actually crumble. Which is probably a building violation. But
Slap
anyways,
some white paint on it. It'll be all right.
oh, that's what they did.
Nice.
The landlord special. Oh my god.
But like when we first got it, like the first time I walked in, I was like, hey, like I was feeling the vibes. I was like we're gonna buy this place, I think. But it's kind of like I feel the vibes. Like it's kind of dark in here. I don't know why it's so dark. Like it was just dark. I don't know why. And we buy it. We get in there, and I'm sitting at the table talking to folks, meeting to folks, like at the far back end of our coffee shop. And I keep hearing this noise. It's like a crinkling noise. And I'm like, what is that? And it's an old building. We have like 2 apartments on top of us. So I was like, okay, pipes, air. But then I like looked around and really like assessed where this noise could be coming from and what it could be. And I was like, okay, that doesn't really make sense. That's cool. The next day comes by. I'm doing the same thing. I hear this noise again. And I'm like, okay, different time. There's like, I'm like I'm like tapping on the walls. Like there's a fake plant over there. I'm like shaking it. I'm like, there's it sounds like the really thin plastic that's really hard. And somebody was just like that. And so I was like, okay, that's weird. And it happened for about like a week and a half every day. And then around that time, I kid you not, like 2 or 3 times, I thought I saw like a shadow figure peeking out of the indoor window. So we have an indoor window that connects to our office in the back. And it kind of like looked like it was coming out the side. It was just like, huh, okay, there's people in here. And then it just went away. And I saw this like 2 or 3 times. And I was like, okay, like the crinkling, the shadow figure, weird stuff. And then I heard like footsteps every now and then. And like I said, we have an apartment upstairs. So I was like, oh, whatever. Like it's 2 of them actually, but one's directly above this spot. I was like, whatever, like footsteps, whatever. Then it stops. So this is going somewhere. This is going to get crazy. So this area was actually, before all the buildings were there, a lot of Civil War stuff, go figure, and stuff like that.
Also an Indian burial ground.
Well, you know, it's funny that you say that. This is not a burial ground, but they like the city really harps into like this used to be like Muskogee land until like Opelika used to mean big swamp, and like these like. Did you ask a Muskogee person what this meant, or did you just make it up? Anyways, that's a whole nother thing. So like people are like, yeah, there's been like riots and stuff that's happened down here, a lot of death. So it goes away for like a couple months, and maybe about 2 months ago, I sat out some milk. I put it on the like back end of our office. I forgot it, so of course it exploded all over the floor. But when I went to go get it, because my wife was like, hey, like, knucklehead, you left some stuff. And I was like, oh, yeah, put it over where, because I put it where none of us go. Like, none of us go there, so it's easy to forget. And she stopped me, she was like, hey, oh, my nose is running. That's weird. Anyways, hey, is that a boot print? I was like, a what print? And she was like, that right there in the milk. And I was like, huh? And so I pick up the milks, which were, you know, obviously busted all over the floor. And there is a boot print that is coming halfway out the door that we don't open, had stuff in front of it, and it was like halfway in the wall. And so I was like, what the hell is going on around here? And so I'm like, and this is how you know I really saw something that I could not explain, because I didn't even bother to pull my phone out. I just sat there and just stared at it like a dad and their kid had just fallen and you're waiting for them to cry.
With your hands on your head.
Crouched.
I was like, what is that? And so I looked up at the bottom of my shoe, asked our employee, I looked up at the bottom of it. Like, nobody wears boots in there. It was like a boot print, like a combat boot. And it was only half a footprint, but the way to actually make this footprint is physically impossible for a human being. There's no way you could do it in any way, because half of it was coming out the wall. So it was like the front half like this, but like there's a door and then there's the wall. And like, it was like, if this is the door, it was like boot print. And I, to this day, could not explain it. But since then, I've been doing some research like around this area. And so like, we're not the only building that's had like weird, like paranormal experiences in their buildings at weird times that they can't explain. I think mine has really like, I wish I like took a picture so people could see it. So they were like, oh yeah, there's a boot print in the milk. Yeah, okay, Josh. Yeah, just trying to make it haunted. But yeah, so like other people have had paranormal experiences, and apparently there's like catacombs and stuff up on our streets. And
wow.
But yeah, long story short, that's my really like very anticlimactic ghost story. A blueprint showed up in some spoiled milk. So
hey, it's more than I've had in my house.
And it had to, and so I guess the the heightened part, like, is that it happened during the course of us working. So like,
who's gonna be back there?
Yeah, nobody was back there. So also, what the F?
Yeah.
That's it. Then I'm sorry.
Some Confederate soldiers like, what the hell are you doing here?
Well, to be fair,
I want a pumpkin spice latte, damn it.
there were a lot of like Confederate and Union camps in that area, like a lot. And there's a lot of like disease outbreak and stuff in that area. So a lot of folks died. There's a cemetery like right down the street that
a lot of cholera.
Like, yeah, it actually was. Yeah. And typhoid.
Typhoid, really cholera, yellow fever,
yeah. And like it's a huge cemetery with nothing but like Confederate soldiers, really.
Oof.
It's real great. But yeah, there goes my story. That's a ghost story, y'all. I'm sorry, it wasn't better than that.
No, that's
I love a ghost story.
The boot print, that's fucking wild.
Yeah,
that's just like, oh shit.
Yeah, and other than that, it's like so quiet in there. I will say, I do get a little spooked at nighttime. There's something about the nighttime in that building that just does not feel good. And so like when I'm shutting down, like all the lights are on until I'm like out the door, pretty much. I don't play games.
Not giving it even half a chance to try to sneak out of a shadow or something.
I got my boots. I got my hat. I'm bringing Spooky back.
I will move all the furniture in that coffee shop. All the furniture's moving. Every shelf knocked over, I'm moving it. I don't want to see it.
I didn't ask for decaf. Everything's gone.
I want a pumpkin spice latte, damn it. Let's rise again.
No, if we're going by, if a ghost can be an evil spirit, they shouldn't be able to have pumpkin spice, because the spices that go into pumpkin spice were supposed to be like holy spices. So no pumpkin spice lattes for evil ghosts. Yeah, because it was supposed to, so those are spices. Now, granted, this is Europeans using South Asian spices, so they're going to ascribe things that South Asian people probably didn't. But those spices were highly prized, very expensive, and considered holy. So that's why you'd have them around Christmas time, and so that's why it'd be in your heavy Christmas end of the year foods, and that's when they got transcribed into pumpkin foods, which happen at the end of the year in the United States. And there's no pumpkin in a pumpkin spice latte. It's just the spices that you would have in a pumpkin pie at that point, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's my thesis.
That's fascinating, because like everybody knows people in the South really like minorities in the South don't like pumpkins, they like sweet potatoes. So I find that very interesting.
So there we
I do
go.
love sweet potato pie so much.
Oh, very interesting. Yeah,
Love sweet potato pie.
That's yeah.
I want to go home.
I haven't eaten today. I'm starving.
All right, Nelson,
All
take
right,
us
y'all.
out.
At What's Left of the South, we believe the South will rise again, but this time for the right reasons, those being worker-owned means of production, decolonization, and self-determination for all oppressed peoples. Make sure to click on our link tree in the show notes to find all of our social media, our brand new merch store with some awesome designs, where all the profits go to help Sweet Mark pay for top surgery, and to subscribe to our Patreon to hear our After Dark series, where we're going to be reading Ghost Adventure fan fiction. And we have a backlog of episodes that are really funny where we just talk shit about the news. Like an F-35 Raptor crashing in South Carolina and getting turned into a moonshine still. Shout out to our Patreon subscribers. Our producer is Mr. Speaker. Theme music is by the band The Last Thing Remember. Edited by Psychotic Refuge. We are coming to you from the Magic City, Birmingham, Alabama, as well as sweet Georgia and jolly old England. We also like to recognize that we're recording on land that is occupied and rightfully belongs to the Muskogee and Cherokee nations. Josh, where can people find you?
Yeah, you can find me everywhere at Joshua Darren. That's Dairen, not Darien. Please put the I before the R. Please. It's just to be, please.
I know you got a link tree I'll drop in the show notes for sure.
Yep. And you could just
where's the coffee shop at?
Yeah, you can go find me at the coffee shop in the downtown historic district of Opelika, South 8th Street. I'm literally always there, like every day. Every day, all day. Yeah, we're hiring, so but yes.
Be normal though. Don't like.
Please be normal. Do not try to make another boot print in the milk.
Yeah.
For the love of
Yeah.
God, don't waste more of his milk.
If anyone actually listens, if anyone who listens to this podcast actually goes to Josh's coffee shop, like take a picture. I think that'd be kind of funny. Be like,
Yeah,
I found
please
the
take a
coffee
picture.
shop because of the podcast.
I love pictures. I'm not shy to any camera. I'm a communications major and a Gemini, so like, yeah, give me all the attention I want. I'd eat it up.
Oh my god!
I will go out of my way to get it. But nonetheless, yeah, follow me on all socials at the same name, Joshua Darren. I before the R. The coffee shop. You can find me on Alabama Vintage page, riling up people for our kind of lost and hidden stories from Alabama. Yeah, and that's it. You might see me on some other stuff, but just follow me and you'll see that.
Hell yeah! All right, Spooky Mark, what we got?
Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary, Bloody